doesn't matter that I have been conducting these presentations for 16 years. I always get really nervous, and especially when you put me in a Zoom environment. I was sharing with Scott and Tammy earlier, I love to have these conversations in person so that I can see your face and see how you're reacting and better understand what you're needing. I'm getting a little bit more comfortable, especially as I was saying at the beginning, now that I figured out how I can scroll through and see people's faces a little bit better, and it's not just me staring at myself or staring at my PowerPoint. So thank you for joining today and taking the time to learn a little bit more about child protection, especially as we go into another unprecedented summer. My name is Britt Darwin-Looney, as Tammy mentioned, and I am YUSA's Vice President of Child Protection and Organizational Risk, which means that I help support Ys in their child protection and aquatic safety areas primarily, as well as in 2020, I became the expert on COVID. So you know how it is in Hawaii. You get to do a lot of different things. Definitely not what I was expecting when I joined in August of 2019. For those of you who I haven't met, I was with Presidium for 14 years before joining YUSA. And with Presidium, I oversaw all of Presidium's youth development accounts, which included YMCAs. And when I joined Presidium in 2006, my first client was the Y. So really, this is all I've ever known when it comes to youth protection and the environment in which we serve. I grew up in a Y. I found my shark swimming badge not too long ago, and I've have it proudly up on my counter now to share with my daughter so that she can also aspire to be a great swimmer herself. But I love the Y, and that's why I chose to join YUSA and continue the efforts of child protection in this area. So with our time today, what I really want to focus on is what we know about child protection and what we know about abuse and how it occurs. I also want to talk to you about trends. So as you probably know, YUSA implemented the reporting requirement in October of 2020. So it was supposed to go into effect in April of 2020, but because of COVID, we delayed that until October of 2020, which now has allowed us to gather specific data about how abuse is happening in YMCAs. So we've always known how abuse occurs in all youth serving organizations, and it's going to be similar to what we're seeing in Ys, but now we have very specific information as to circumstances, programs, locations that we can share with you, which is the exact intent of the reporting requirement, so that now we have information to learn from, and we can make sure you're best resourced in how to prevent those types of incidents. I also want to talk about some specific things we can focus on this summer, understanding that we are still in very, very unique circumstances. I'll echo what Teresa said just a moment ago. We're getting excited about reopening. That reopening also causes a lot of stress and anxiety. And we have staff coming back to us who have not been interacting with others for a long period of time. We have kids who are coming to us who haven't been interacting with others. So this is an extremely important summer to really focus on what we know works in child abuse prevention. So I have really parsed out specific information that you can take away today to help you this summer. You have amazing tools available to you through your insurance partners, through Presidium, through your alliances, through your service delivery partners. And I also know that sometimes that can be overwhelming. So I'm going to hope to kind of boil that down for you so that you can take away things and implement them specifically this summer. Then hopefully we'll have some time for you all to break out and talk with one another about what you've learned. And I want you to be able to commit to doing something that we talk about today, and then be able to hold each other accountable to doing that thing. I know that so many times, especially in this environment, we're on Zoom and we're doing a million different things while we're also listening to a webinar. I get that reality. I hope that at the end, though, you will take some dedicated time to think about some type of commitment you will make this summer to child protection. So that's kind of how we'll wrap up as we also touch on a few of the additional resources available. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the child abuse statistics. We get those from a variety of different methods and mechanisms, and you receive those in all of the child protection trainings that you go to. I will say recently the CDC has updated their information so that it indicates 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys. I haven't yet done the research to see why that number changed from the boys, because for boys earlier we were saying 1 in 7 or 1 in 6. So I don't know yet why they've indicated that change, but we hope that that means it's occurring less. I I don't know. I think it's going to take us a couple years to get back to the true data, because we know that during COVID, reporting went down. Abuse was probably going up, but reporting was going down because kids aren't in environments like schools in the Y where they can have someone report and see what's going on. So I think for a while, we're going to kind of have to know what we know. And the most important thing is that we know that 1 in 10 kids are sexually abused by the age of 18. And the likelihood then that a child who's in a Y program has been or will be abused is extremely high. And if you think about the fact that then 90% of the time the abuse is perpetrated by someone the child or family knows and trusts, we're faced with a difficult situation, right? We know that these kids are experiencing things outside of the Y, they're bringing that into the Y. We can't necessarily prevent that. We can report that when we see it. But what we at the Y have, I'll say, control over is making sure that our environments are safe from these things occurring. So I don't need to convince any of you, like I used to need to do when I started these trainings in 2006, that abuse is a real issue. We know that it is. And we know that it's occurring in our Ys. And I'll talk specifically about that in a moment. So how does abuse happen in youth serving organizations? 2 primary areas of focus that we talk about, and that's adult to child and also child to child. But it's not quite as cut and dry as that, because at the Y, we hire staff who are also minors, and we also hire staff who are just over that age. So we have very young staff interacting with staff who are minors, and those boundaries get really, really blurry. And that continues to be where we see an increase in incidents of abuse, is between that blurred boundary situation. The other thing that we do at the Y is we have kids who, I'll say kids who are 14 or 15, who act as counselors in training or leaders in training, especially in our camp environments. And we're putting them in charge of younger kids. We also know that that is another example of youth to youth sexual activity, when we put one youth in charge of another youth and we're not monitoring those interactions. And then I'll specifically talk about this more when I speak on trends. But in my time at Presidium, we focused a lot on that example I was just talking about with mixed age groups. And it's still a risk, but more of the trend that I am seeing is kids who are 7 or 8 years old, who are in a locker room or bathroom or even classroom or playground unsupervised, and they act out sexually with one another. So I think in the past, a lot of our training focused on separating mixed age groups. And I think that's still important, but we need to help people recognize the risk of same age participants acting out sexually with one another. The other thing that I'll mention here is the impact of COVID. And you know, with there's so many various impacts on your whys and the staff that you've lost. And with that, losing institutional knowledge, losing staff positions, needing to shift people into new positions. I don't want to dwell on all of the negatives that we know are already there. It's a reality. And so we have to figure out how we're going to address it. It's just like when we talk about programs and we say, well, the solution is add more staff. That can't always be our solution. We would love for that to be the answer, but we know it's not. So what can we do with the staff that we have to ensure that they're performing at their best and that we are providing them with the guidance and skills that they need to prevent abuse? Many of your counselors that you're going to be bringing in this summer, your staff, they have never thought about one child acting out sexually with another child. They haven't talked about that. They hear about adult to youth abuse in the media, but it rarely does youth to youth sexual activity make it to the media, but it's occurring daily. And so we need to make sure that our young staff in particular are prepared with how we deal with those types of situations. Now, with all of that, I want to reiterate I'll say the most positive message that I can think about and that I hope you carry out through all of this is that we know abuse is preventable. We know that with the right systems in place, this is something we can prevent. And if you know me and you've heard me do presentations before, you know that I like to be able to have some things in control. And so I feel that with so many things at this time out of our control, with COVID and mask requirements or no mask requirements and health guidelines, and what is this city making us do? And what is this county making us do? We have to flow. We have to go with that. We have to go with the flow. There are specific things, though, that we can do to make sure our kids are safe in our programs. And I take comfort in that. When I get overwhelmed with all the things that are going on in this world, I take comfort in knowing that this is something we can do. So with that, I challenge you to, hopefully I can get now my screen isn't moving. I challenge you to find your why. Why do you do this work? What is it that motivates you? Let's see. So here, let's do this, Scott. While I'm trying to figure out how to make my screen move, maybe you can take people off mute and let's have them chime in on what is their why.
Absolutely. So everyone has the ability to unmute, or you can go into the little, if you hit participants at the bottom of your taskbar, you can go and raise your hand and I can unmute you that way as well, whichever one you prefer.
I'll go first since now my screen's working and hopefully that'll kick some of you off. But so before the world shut down, I was traveling a lot with YUSA. And one day on my second to last trip, I opened up my suitcase and my daughter had put notes all throughout my bag and tucked it into my little neatly packed packing cubes. And this is one of the notes that she left for me. And it says, for those of you who can't read 8-year-old handwriting, she was 8 at the time, do your job and keep me and other kids safe. She's my why. She's my why I get up and do this every day. So what about some of you? I see Teresa has her hand raised, Scott.
Yep. Teresa, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay. It's the right thing to do. I got tears in my eyes, Britt. I'm just telling you right now. And I didn't cry at my own wedding, but that note kind of says it all. It's our job. We should be protecting children. And it should not just be white people or people in childcare. It should be everyone's job. And take it to heart. It's the right thing to do. That's all I could say.
Thanks, Teresa. Who else wants to share?
Hi, this is Stacy Colston Patterson from the Benjamin Harrison YMCA at YMCA of Greater Indianapolis. And I think for me, it's a lot of knowing that that trauma will follow those kids forever. It will affect them for the rest of their lives. So the least we can do is try to prevent them from having that experience.
Thanks, Stacy. And we know right now we're talking about so much with trauma and the impact of trauma and ACEs and being able to follow that throughout children's lives. And you're so right. If we could prevent one of those, we're making such a huge difference. Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. This is Stephanie Dieter from the Sky Family YMCA in Southwest Florida. And I think for me, it happened about 5 or 6 years ago. We work closely in our community with the Child Protection Center, and we have a representative come in every year for our all camp staff training, which we do at the beginning of summer camp. And she was talking about the different kinds of abuse and, but one of the things that she said that really resonated with me, and it was kind of an aha moment, was that during the summertime, the incidence of reporting goes down. And that's because the children aren't in school and, the teachers are the #1 reporters of abuse. And it was such an aha moment for me because I realized, where are those kids? Those kids are in our programs. And so I deliver that message every time I can, especially to our camp counselors, group leaders, because we have an opportunity to really make a difference. And I think that our role is so crucial. And so I take that with me, and I always have, because, so to me, that's my why.
Thanks for sharing, Stephanie. Carol?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm actually answering the question, my why, but my daughter was in gymnastics, so my daughter is my motivator. But what really keeps me motivated about it is just the lack of understanding of her friends' parents about child abuse. They think, oh, well, they've been screened, so they're safe because they've been screened. They don't understand grooming behaviors. They don't understand, how to help their kids protect themselves. And I know we can make a difference. And so that's kind of what keeps me going, is like, I want to make sure people become educated about it. And so that motivates me, knowing that we can do it. We can make a difference.
Thanks, Carol. That reminds me also, again, my daughter, I talk about her a lot. I can't help it. But this morning when I woke up and I looked at Facebook, because I'm that age and I still look at Facebook, and my memories popped up from 3 years ago where I had shared about something that I had written when I was at Presidium, and it was 6 questions parents can ask when they're sending kids to summer camp. And so just so you know, if you're my friend on Facebook, I'm going to share it again today. And I'm going to mention that we all met together to talk about what WISE can do, because it's important that parents know what they should be looking for when they're going into programs. That's part of our whole risk management loop. We want them to come in and say, what are you going to be doing to keep my kids safe while they're here? And that they then can go out into the community and talk to other parents about what it is to keep kids safe. I think for those of us who have children, we can find the inherent why, I think. And those of us who have worked with children for a long time also have an understanding of the impact that abuse can have, and the need, therefore, to step in and ensure that nothing happens. I think, in my experience, that sometimes that's harder for our younger staff as they come in. And so, one of my challenges to you is, as you're preparing for summer and as part of their training, help those counselors find their why, because their why is going to be different than my why. And, I've heard camp directors say to counselors, this is their most important possession. This is their most important thing in their life, and they're handing it over to us for the summer. They don't understand what that means. They can't. They haven't had that experience. So help them to think through their why in what's going to make them walk over to a colleague when a colleague is doing something that they know is against their policy, or what's going to make them stand up when they see that red flag behavior or grooming that Carol talked about. That's hard to do. It is hard for us as adults to call someone out. And it's even harder when you're 18 and you're not sure. So we want them to understand that if they see that behavior, one, they're empowered to call it out. But secondly, if they're the type of person who truly can't do that, then you give them mechanisms to report. And so that they don't carry that with them. I have been investigating incidents of abuse in youth serving organizations for over 15 years. And I will tell you that in almost every situation, I will talk to someone who says, especially if it's an adult to youth incident, someone who will tell me, I thought there was something off about that person, but I just didn't know who to tell. I didn't know. I just felt like I'd be making a judgment that it wasn't my judgment to make. What if that's just how they are? And we have to help people get comfortable with it's not you don't have to do the investigation. You're also not calling someone an offender by pointing out a behavior. We have to give them that culture of safety where they feel comfortable to bring those things to us. And that takes time. That takes spending time with your staff so that they feel comfortable bringing those things forward. So, part of that starts with ensuring that they know what their why is in this work. So this is my why. It's my favorite thing my favorite note she's written me. She likes to write me notes, but this is my favorite one. So I keep this one. And now I'm going to get stuck on my screen again. Oh, goodness. I don't know why.
While you're working on that, I just want to lift up, there were some really good answers in the chat.
Will you please read some of those, Scott?
Yeah, we've got, for my family, my kids, and the little ones who don't have advocates like us, we've got history makes us better decision makers. It's important not to let it repeat itself. And then we've also got one around my kids drive me to always do my best. I not only for them, but for other children so that they can feel safe and be able to be themselves at the Y. And then we just got one in there that since we can't control most of the things that happen to our children, since we cannot control most of the things that happen to our children, we can definitely make sure to be the best and make our Y programs the safest, funnest, and where the children can be knowing that they can be cared for and that someone feels like they're advocating for them.
I love all of those. There's some wonderful whys that you can share with your groups as you're doing your summer trainings. So now that I got my screen to work, let's talk a little bit about some of the trends. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we have been able to track abuse incidents since April of 2020, although it didn't become required until October of 2020. So since that time, we've had 141 incidents that have been reported to YUSA. I do not think everyone is reporting all of the incidents of abuse that are happening or that are alleged. And so I will use this moment to encourage you, please, please, please report. Even if you're questioning if this is something that needs to be reported to YUSA, this is not punitive. This is to, one, help you walk through that process. Because what happens when reports come in is I review the report and then look through what's happened so far, think through, are there additional steps that could be taken to ensure the safety of the child? And then I respond. And it depends on what the situation is as to the next step. It may be that we connect with Presidium. It may be that it's a situation where we feel like a parent letter needs to go out. And so we walk you through that situation to make sure you have the tools you need. Then what we can do kind of holistically is look to see where are incidents happening. And do we need additional tools to prevent incidents in those places? So as I did an analysis on this yesterday, because I wanted to make sure we had the most recent information for the adult to youth incidents reported, I want to highlight one thing. In reviewing the materials, the majority of things reported that are related to adult to youth have been perpetrated by someone who is no longer at the Y, but they have gone on to typically another youth serving organization and they have been arrested there. It is part of the reporting requirement to let us know about those types of incidents, because then we need to determine if we should do outreach to Y participants as well. The other piece of this is that in those, a lot of them involve some form of electronic communication. So what can we do in terms of when we think through prevention with these types of things is really honing in on the policies you have around electronic communication. And so here's what I mean. Do we have policies about staff bringing their phones to programs and sharing them with participants? Because we have had reported incidents of where staff have pornography on their phones and have showed it to youth participants. Or we have had staff who have borrowed a youth participant's phone and set up inappropriate dating apps. Or we have incidents where they have continued to communicate outside of program through electronic communication. This is one that definitely causes me concern, because I think that in times of COVID, we have become more relaxed in being on our phones all the time, kids on their phones all the time. We've recognized it's just kind of a way of life right now, but we have to be clear with these boundaries when it comes to our staff and their interactions with kids in our programs. So if you don't have a policy about electronic communication, I highly suggest that you have one for this summer to protect the kids in your program and to also protect your Y, because we know that that is an extremely high risk. The next thing for adult to youth, the next most prevalent area is in bathrooms or locker rooms. I don't think that that's surprising to most of you, because if you have been through any of the Presidium trainings, what we know is that offenders look for, to be able to perpetrate abuse, offenders look for three things. They look for access, privacy, and control. So they think that in a locker room, they have that privacy. So as you go into the summer months, I would love for you to keep that framework in mind of how do we decrease access, privacy, and control, especially when it comes to bathrooms and locker rooms. I know this can be complicated, but we have to, one way we're already thinking about access is we do a sex offender registry screen for our members who are coming in. That's good, right? But we know that only a very small percentage of offenders actually have some type of criminal history. So it's not necessarily deterring someone, but it is giving us data as to who is in our facility at what time. So we want to make sure that our members are following those protocols of screening in, because that helps us determine who has had access. Then when it comes to privacy, ensuring that we have mechanisms in place for monitoring the high-risk locations in our facilities. I can't tell you what all of those are, because you have to look at your own facility to figure out what they could be. I don't know where your stairwells are. I don't know, what your bathroom configurations are. If you have family locker rooms, what are your protocols for monitoring those versus single use? But there are allegations in all different types of bathrooms, locker rooms. I'm not going to say one type is better than another, because it's happening in all types. The other most common place has been resident camps. Now, I will note that most of these are historical allegations, And so many of you are probably familiar with the states that have opened up windows for their statute of limitations. New York has been the one that's been highlighted the most, but this is occurring in many states. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point it occurs across all states, that survivors have the opportunity to bring a lawsuit many years after the event when that was prohibited in the past. So we are seeing lots of historical events that are just now being reported. Now, we can't prevent any of those. And I will tell you that if your Y receives one, it's really challenging because many times we don't have the facts. We weren't there. I was speaking with one CEO and she was dealing with an incident where the allegation was from a year she wasn't even born. So she's challenged with, what do I do with this? So for this, what I would recommend is back in 2019, we put out a preparing and responding guide, and it's linked in the resources later on, so I'll make sure to point it out there. But we put together a guide for how you can prepare for historical allegations. Part of that is going back and tracing your insurance history for your Y. And unfortunately, what I have found in many of these situations is the Y has done that, but there's a period of time where they can't find their coverage. And that's when these allegations come from. So please do your due diligence, have someone do your due diligence in finding out who your previous insurance carriers were, because that is the biggest slowdown that we see in these historical allegations that come forward. Then the next area is classrooms. And, I think that one could be surprising because you think back to what I said a moment ago in terms of access, privacy, and control. And we think of in classrooms that there's not a lot of privacy, but sometimes there is privacy in anonymity. So stick with me on this one. When there's a lot going on, sometimes that allows an offender to operate because then they aren't being watched in their interaction with various children. So we're also busy doing the things that we need to be doing that we're not watching our fellow staff. So this is where it kind of comes back to the abuse prevention is everyone's responsibility in that we have to hold each other accountable. We're not accusing our coworkers, but we're holding each other accountable and ensuring that people aren't breaking policies or violating boundaries. The next area that I'm going to move into now is youth to youth. And so we know that youth to youth abuse, or I don't like to say abuse, youth to youth sexual activity, because we don't know, unlike adult to child abuse, we don't know the motivators behind youth to youth sexual activity many times. And just because someone engages in youth to youth sexual activity, it does not mean that they will go on to be an offender. So I do like to clarify that. But we know that youth to youth sexual activity has been occurring and increasing, over the years. And so in 2017, the Associated Press did a research study within schools, and they found that for every incident of adult to youth abuse, there were 7 incidents of youth to youth sexual activity. So it's happening 7 times more. So while right now our data at YUSA isn't showing that, we actually have it's a little, it's not even half, it's not quite half of the incidents reported. I also don't think that all of those are getting reported to YUSA, because sites are addressing them and thinking that it could be normal sexual curiosity. A reminder that there's no such thing as normal sexual curiosity when it comes to our programs. We have to have that zero tolerance behavior and make sure that we respond. It does not mean that in every situation we're going to determine that the kid can't come back to the program, but it is a situation that needs to be addressed. So again, I think we need to continue to increase our knowledge around reporting those to YUSA so that we can continue to gather that data. So where we're seeing this, again, I don't think it's surprising that the first location is bathrooms and locker rooms. When it comes to youth sexual activity, kids look for places where they won't have supervision. So we need to, as we go into summer, make sure we have supervision plans for monitoring our bathrooms and our locker rooms. And that includes always looking at number of feet in stalls, making sure that staff are standing in the doorways. You know, we've gone through different iterations of what are the correct bathroom procedures over time. And when I first started with the working with the Ys, they did the buddy system, and then it was the responsible buddy system where you're sending 3 kids. What we know now is that it is prevented only when there is a staff who is within presence and can hear and a lot of times see what's going on. Now, people ask, are we at risk if we're putting a staff person in the bathroom, because then they could be accused of abuse from that perspective? To be honest, I'm less concerned about that aspect of it because there are so many individuals there and so many kids. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but there's a greater likelihood that youth would act out sexually without supervision during times when they're in various stages of undress. Then the next 2, playgrounds and classrooms. And so what we find here a lot of the time is when this occurs, that they're within the proper ratios. It just boils down to where are staff positioned and what are they doing during those times. So we had, this is before my time at YUSA when I was with Presidium, and we had the helpline, a case where 2 kids during a summer camp program were allowed to be under a picnic table, and kindergartners performed oral sex on one another. Now, when we look into the situation, it was a transition time. So kids were getting picked up from the program. Other kids were playing. Teachers were, they were spread out, but they were helping parents check in, check out. They were engaged in other activities. So again, reiterating the importance of having specific supervision zones that staff are responsible for, especially during those high risk times and transition times. And so I equate that to both playgrounds and classrooms, a little bit different, but similar types. And then the next place is pools. And I think that one kind of goes back to our anonymity comment earlier, in that when you have lots of kids in the pool, for some reason, inhibitions seem to go down. And I see that both from adult staff with kids, where it becomes like piggybacks are okay once we're in the water. I don't understand, but that's kind of a universal thing that I've seen. But also kids think that they can't be seen when stuff is going on underwater. So that's another place for youth to use sexual activity that our staff may not be thinking about, that it could occur in that type of environment. Woo. Yay, it actually worked. Okay, so now let's move into, once we've talked about how we know this, worked too well. Now that we've talked about how we know that this is happening, what can we do? What can we do this summer? What are your plans? How are we going to make sure, knowing what we know, that we're doing our best to keep kids safe? So those of you who are familiar with the safety equation know that the safety equation is broken into 8 operations. So that's the Presidium safety equation that I'm referencing. It is the backbone of the Know Your Score that your associations complete. And so I've kind of pulled out some of those different operations, making them specific to our summer operations. So focusing on training, and you'll notice, actually, I think the most important word that I have here is frequently. Secondly, implementing supervision plans. Third, responding and reporting. And fourth, engaging parents, guardians, and youth. So when we talk about training, I want everyone, I hope this is your commitment hopefully I'm gonna give you time to break into your groups. Hopefully this is your commitment to make sure that you talk about abuse prevention more than just your staff training and your staff orientation at the beginning of summer. Now, I didn't include screening in this list. Screening is also important, but I'm thinking for many of you, we're already past that point. So I'm moving into, we've got our group that's going to be working with kids this summer. What do they need to know? You have a code of conduct, and your code of conduct, every staff should know what your code of conduct is. Your counselors, your front desk, your people who help with your housekeeping, everyone should know the WISE code of conduct because they can play a role in your abuse prevention efforts. They are the ones, you know, your front desk sees everything. When I was with Presidium and we would do assessments of WISE, we would always include an interview with facilities and front desk because they could tell us what was really going on throughout the day and if policies were followed or not. So if they know that information, they can help be part of the risk management loop. We also want to make sure that your counselors understand what is outlined and what is allowed and not allowed in terms of interactions with kids. So making sure that your electronic communication policy is included within this code of conduct. That's one that we highlighted. Making sure information about what is allowed outside of program. So outside of program contact, you know, different WISE have it in different ways, but is babysitting allowed? Can you go to their youth sports games? Like making sure it's clear to them what those policies are and what a policy violation looks like. Make sure that they understand, everyone understands what it looks like to how you recognize red flags and policy violations. There's lots of fun activities you can do with this when you're doing staff training, where you present them with different scenarios and you give them all red flags and they wave their red flag in the air to show, hey, I understand that this is a red flag or this is a policy violation, or you could do it however you want to do it, but get them engaged in the activity so that they're actually walking through what it looks like. Make sure that, again, that they recognize what to do with youth to youth sexual activity. Our counselors need to understand what it's going to be like if they walk into a bathroom and find two kids in a stall with their pants down. They need to be prepared to walk into that situation and know how to handle it so that it's handled appropriately for those kids. I have seen this go really poorly when staff haven't been trained in how they respond and how they make the children feel. So they need to know what to do with that. They also need to know the importance of making sure that they report that to a supervisor, because you do not want a call from a parent in the evening saying, this happened to my child in your program today and your staff knew about it, but your staff didn't tell you. So making sure they're aware of that risk and what to do with it. And then the responding and reporting precursors to abuse and actual incidents or allegations of abuse. Our staff need to know what to do with all of these types of incidents. They need to understand what's required under mandated reporting, but equally important, what to do when they recognize these red flags, suspicious behaviors, policy violations. We want to stop the abuse before it's allowed to occur. And that's actually what brought me into this work. Is I'm actually an attorney, and I worked in our child advocacy clinic representing kids who'd been removed from their families because of incidents of abuse. And I recognized at that time that we've gotten better at doing things after the abuse has happened. So in terms of mandated reporting, we have not yet put enough emphasis on the responding before abuse occurs and recognizing those red flags. So we want to make sure we're equipping our staff with that. So next, implementing supervision plans. So pretty straightforward here. And we'll make sure you have this PowerPoint, and this is your guide to everything you need to do this summer. Here you go, simple. You need to identify your high-risk situations in all of your programs and sites. So again, thinking through that access, privacy, and control. Where are those high-risk locations for both adult to youth and youth to youth abuse where it could happen? From that, then you create site-specific monitoring plans. And so it would be great if I could drop into the chat a procedure for monitoring bathrooms that would work for all of you. I can't do that. I can give you some guidelines, and Presidium has some guidelines in their practices that they provide. But you have to make them site-specific to your locations and your programs. So create those. Then ensuring that those supervision plans include monitoring of staff and youth. Now, here, I want to point out that in my years of working with all youth serving organizations, we focus so heavily on training our new frontline staff about abuse prevention and what they need to do. Sometimes we fail to talk about our supervisors and their responsibility, and we don't visit their sites. We need to make sure that our supervisors are also following our protocols and practices. So many times we make excuses for them and say, oh, that's just this person, or oh, that's just this person. They're really great at what they do. And we let them break policy. That is setting us up. That is allowing them to operate in their own environment. There are many cases that I've investigated where it was a supervisor who had been allowed to create their own culture at a location so that the staff wouldn't report them. So we want to make sure our supervision plans include ways to supervise the supervisor. Third, requiring accountability and adhering to supervision plans by assigning a point person at each location. So I've been thinking through this, and I would love to hear how some of you try this out this summer. So, we need to have these supervision plans. They need to be site specific. And in my experience, creating those is the easier part. The harder part is making sure that people continue to do this weekly and continue to follow up and make sure that people are abiding by policies, especially as summer goes on and we're tired. So I was thinking through some different scenarios, and most of you at your associations have a Presidium guardian. Maybe you're that Presidium guardian, or you have a point person who oversees your child protection efforts. Let's try having that at each of the locations if you don't already. Assign a person each week. Maybe it's a different person each week. You tell me what ends up working out for you, but assign a different person who's in charge of child protection. Because many of you are supervisors or directors, you can't be at each location. So let's assign someone at each location and have them go through these supervision plans. How do we bring it down to their level? And I would love for you to try that out and give me feedback after the summer if that was helpful in your summer. The next thing, responding and reporting. We've talked a lot about this, so I'm just going to kind of gloss through it, but making sure we have internal reporting procedures. Again, you have samples available to you from Presidium for what those should look like. External reporting, so when you need to report something that falls within mandated reporting, and then ensuring that you know how to report incidents to YUSA. With all of this, I want to emphasize the importance of documentation. In multiple instances, when I get a report about youth-to-youth sexual activity, and we're walking through the situation that occurred. Unfortunately, the child had been engaged in a previous incident of acting out sexually, but we didn't have any documentation of it. And so that puts the Y in a really hard position, because it may be something where they want to suspend this child, or it's a situation where we've determined we can't serve this child's needs. But that's surprising to a parent if we haven't communicated with them about any issues in the past. So make sure that we are collecting documentation on both youth-to-youth incidents, also any allegations against staff. If it's a write-up, then it's kept in their file. They're signing off on their corrective action measures, but we want to make sure that we have the documentation to back up our decisions. It's extremely important as we move forward in this. This is just a reminder to you about the reporting requirement. You can find this information on the child protection page on link. And so again, that's going to be available to you if you haven't seen that before. This is a newer page on link that's part of the risk management community, and it specifies all of the child protection requirements, but also then links to the various resources that are available to you. Essentially what this says is if there's an allegation against a current or former staff, that should be reported to YUSA. Also, any incidents of children acting out sexually should be reported to YUSA. Just boiling it down. And if you have questions about if something should be reported, report it. And then I can always move it to another place if it doesn't fit the requirements. The last part that I wanted to make sure that we highlight is how do we engage parents and their parents or guardians and the kids in our programs. So, they can be part of our risk management loop as well. So we want to make sure that kids understand our policies about appropriate and inappropriate interactions. Part of what we're doing is preparing them to go into the world and interact with other adults. And so if we're telling them, we're showing them, yeah, this is how we do hugs and we do side hugs, or now with COVID, I don't know what we do, but we do high fives. I don't know if we can even do those. We do elbow taps there. But we're showing them, we're modeling good, appropriate boundaries. That's what we want to do, because then when they go into another environment and someone tries to violate their boundaries, it puts up a flag for them to say, wait, this isn't right. And they know that that's something they should talk to their parents about. We want to make sure that they have a way to report feedback to us if something is making them feel uncomfortable. And so a lot of resident camps throughout the years have had like what they've called a talk box or a camper box. And that's a way for kids to drop in a note. And the way that the camp directors generally present it is, hey, this can be used for a variety of things. If you want to give someone praise for what they've been doing, then you can put a note in here. If you want to suggest a different snack, put a note in here. But the idea is to destigmatize putting notes in this box, but it's a way to provide campers an opportunity for feedback. And where we've seen really great success with this is kids putting a note in the box about how they're feeling bullied, but they don't feel comfortable telling anyone, but that's a mechanism for them to do so. So I encourage you to have some way for campers to be able to provide feedback and make sure that they understand what it's for and destigmatize using it. The other thing to highlight is 5 days of action this year is actually going to be in June. So in the past, it had normally been in April, then last year was in October because of COVID. This year, the materials are available in June. So if you haven't yet registered, I encourage all of you to register for 5 days of action. So I think here's where you can find all of your resources and link. But before we go, what I would love to do is have my friend Scott break you all into small groups where you commit to one another about something that you're going to try this summer to keep kids safe. I've talked a lot. I've given you a lot of ideas. And I just want you to talk to your group and say something that you're going to commit to. So with that, I think Scott will break us up. We probably will be closing out. You're not going to have long. You're just going to have a few minutes. So be thinking about what that is. And then hopefully he can bring us back just to close out at the very end. I'll be here. Hopefully you'll come back for that so I can put up a link to a few more resources. But I hope Scott hasn't left us because I don't see him on my screen. Do you see him?
Nope, I'm here. I'm ready to go.
Okay, if you'll break us up, then I'll see you all back in just a few minutes.
All right, everyone should be getting the breakout room suggestion now. If you don't see it on your screen, maybe look at the bottom of your screen where it says breakouts and hit that, and it would allow you to join. And I will move any stragglers.
All right, so I know we didn't have quite as long as I would have liked because I talked too much earlier for everyone to share their commitment. So if you didn't have the opportunity to share within your group, I challenge you to find someone at your Y today to share with them what your commitment is. And, do that anyways. Find someone, talk about this, talk about what you learned today. Share with them where they can find some resources. Again, it's all in the child protection page on Link. We also released child protection materials in April for Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so those are also available through Link, and it walks through various activities that you can use for the summer. Also, very quickly, we did add new Presidium resources to that Link page. And so instead of having to go through a separate website to get to Presidium resources, they're all now housed within Link. Also, again, accessible from the child protection page. Your CEOs will be getting an email next week reminding them of the importance of both child protection and aquatic safety as we head into this summer. So you can show off what you've learned by telling them, oh, I've already looked up those resources. Sure, we're implementing everything. So I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please know that that's why I'm here. And I am so thankful for every one of you for all that you do to keep our kids safe, both in child protection and aquatic safety. And I wish you an amazing summer that's safe and fun and provides all the opportunities that these kiddos need right now. So if you need anything, Scott's put in my contact information. Please shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you out. And I just appreciate all of you so very much. And thank you, Tammy, for inviting me to join your group today, and to Scott for helping me with everything.
Brett, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time. Just for the group, and thank you to the Alliance and Scott for running the Zoom. We do have another aquatic safety training. It's in the works, so that'll come out. That should be in June. But more to follow, and looking forward to more virtual safety series. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Keep everybody safe.
Thanks all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Bye.